Welcome to Swan's Room. So, walking sims like this have one very large problem, and that is there's nothing to do. 99.9% of all gameplay in a walking sim is walking to a point of interest and hitting a button to interact with it. That's all you really do in these games. But gameplay is important. It's how the player gains traction with the game. It's how the player interacts with the game. So you have to have some. How do you make your walking to a point of interest and clicking a button interesting? Well, in my mind, there are two aspects to that. And the first is mechanical, so let's go over that. Mechanically speaking, there are some very basic tricks you use to make sure that it is interesting to explore your space. The first of those tricks is clustering. So, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 things in this cluster. This gives us a node of interaction, something that we are here in this space. This is what we are interacting with. Here are a slew of options for us to, interact with. This means that coming over into this corner raises the interaction density. There are 5 things to do here, and if one of them is boring, we can do the next one immediately, right? So that means each of these interactions can be pretty basic. On the other hand, sometimes we get these solo interactables. There's no clustering here, and that means that this is an incredibly important interaction. And it is. It's the plot point, right? We can't go outside until we change our clothes. That's considered an important plot point in this scene. So there's nothing else here. There's no clustering here. This is the point of being here. This door is why we're here, and that's the only thing that matters. Similarly, this closet is actually a critical plot point as well, because we have to change before we can leave. So there's no clustering here either. But there is clustering here, and there's clustering there, and there's clustering here, and here. There's clustering everywhere else, because nothing else in this game is a major plot point. The only things we really need are those two. The ones with no clustering. That said, it's well worth noting that not all elements of a cluster are equal. For example, if we look over there, we can see the backpack from quite far away. It's highlighted. That's an anchor element. Similarly, we can see the cat from far away. It's an anchor element. As we approach, the rest of the interactables come into view and can be approached, right? The cluster becomes clear as you approach the anchor element. But it fades, and you're left with only the anchor element as you leave. Now, strictly speaking, these anchor elements are not 100% necessary. If the backpack was not interactable, we would still approach the desk because it is literally highlighted. So it would be a point of interest even without an actual icon on it. But using the icon is also a valuable tool, so it's worth doing. In addition to just having these clusters in this normal space, we also have the ability to enter into subspaces. This changes the context and how we interact with things, which means that we have a completely different experience in this space. Mechanically speaking, subspaces are an important part of creating texture. We're no longer walking around, we're now rooted in place, and we're looking at things from a different angle, right? Because this angle is much more constrained, we are able to see a lot more detail than we normally would be able to, whatever sort of detail the designer wants to give us. So in this space, there are points of interest that are frequently not actually interactable. For example, this cup here with the brush on top of it, that is very clearly a point of interest. It's not interactable, but because we are able to look at it very, very closely, we understand that this is an important part of her life. It's a point of interest even though it's not an interactable. We can see that again over here. We can interact with some stuff, but there are some things we can't interact with. However, we can still see them up close, so they are still a point of interest. They're just not interactable. It's important to understand that not all points of interest are interactable. I sort of mentioned that when I was talking about this bag as the anchor point. The light shining on the desk is a point of interest whether the bag is there or not. So you have a point of interest even if it is not immediately highlighted as an interactable. The same is true of that TV over there. It's a point of interest even if you can't actually click on it, right? These are things which draw our eye, draw our attention, draw us in, whether they have an icon or not. That's the mechanical side, right? You got clusters of things, you got anchor elements. If something is important, there is less around it. It's on its own, right? If something's less important, then you surround it with all sorts of details because that makes it fun and textured to be there. You can also open up subspaces that have a different method of interaction because it changes things up and gives us a new context and a new flavor. Exciting, right? So that's the easy part, the mechanical side. The other aspect of this is the narrative side, and here is where things get nuanced. This is where you get to really stretch your legs, right? We're here in Swan's room, so Swan has things to say about some stuff, right? Here's the number one mistake that a lot of indie devs make about walking sims. We are not objectively exploring this space looking at interesting things. We are Swan. We are Swan in Swan's room at the start of the game. There are certain things that we are supposed to realize about Swan, certain things that we want to accomplish, and we are trying to outline who she is, what sort of mood she's in, what she's doing. These are important aspects. This room really doesn't change over the course of the game. A couple of minor details do, but the room is basically the same. However, what Swan can interact with constantly changes, because what's important at the moment constantly changes. That's something really important to understand. Here's an example, right? Oh, a crumpled piece of paper. We interact with it. We get a second interaction prompt inside. This is a fun little trick to give you a little bit more texture.
It was stupid to try.
Swan has something to say about it. She doesn't address it directly, but we clearly learn that Swan tried for her swim team, and it went disastrously. So disastrously that she crumpled this up, threw it at the wall, and missed, right? So clearly this went very, very poorly. This is a simple narrative element, and this doesn't come up again because in the next time that we're exploring Swan's room, this isn't what we need to know about her. We need to know this now, but we don't need to know it later, so it goes away. Similarly, these elements here, technically they're points of interest in that we can look at them, right? But they're not something that Swan can interact with, so they're not part of who she is or what we need to know about her at the moment. Cat tree, same thing. We can't interact with it now, so it's not important to us now. This leather box, can't go into it, can't look at the stuff inside of it. It doesn't matter to who she is at the moment. Dresser, we can't look at our clothes in the dresser. It's not part of who she is. She's not obsessed with clothes, so she can't interact with it. But we can look at these photos on the side and get real close up and personal. This is important. This is who Swan is. Swan doesn't comment. She doesn't have anything to say about these photos. But the fact that she is willing to pick them up and look at them closely says a lot. Just the fact that that is possible makes these something that matter to Swan in this context. This is who Swan is. This is what she remembers. This is who she considers herself to be. She doesn't care about clothes. She doesn't care about, banners for her school. What she cares about are these photos of her being a huge nerd. And similarly, we look at the corner here.
Oh, I can tell you were playing with my stuff again, Fluffbutt.
This matters to her because we can interact with it, because we can see it. Later on, the things will change. The context will change. Different things for different interactions. And the same is true if we go into someone else's room. If we go into Kat's room, a different person, right? We're going to have completely different things to interact with, completely different priorities. For example, we will not be able to sit at Kat's desk because that's Kat's desk. That's her space. We would only do that if we were investigating something or if she asked us to, right? It would be considered very strange for us to sit down at her desk and start poking through her stuff, pretending to be her, right? So it's important to understand the context that you're trying to serve with your narrative. The points of interest don't all have to come with commentary from the character. The fact that you can interact with them at all tells you an enormous amount about what you're trying to learn. And did you just miss that little thing I did? I sat down at the desk. That's an interaction. The fact that we can sit down at the desk is an interaction, and it does matter, and it tells us a lot. It actually creates a whole new space with a whole new context. This is Swan's working area. This is what she's doing at the moment. This is who she is, moment to moment, day to day, as a person. The fact that there is a subspace that Swan can interact with tells us more about who she is and what she's trying to do. We wouldn't get the opportunity to sit at Kat's desk, Kat being another person, because that wouldn't make any sense from an interaction standpoint. That would not be something Swan would do, so Swan doesn't do it. So even when you're doing things like laying out subspaces and defining where things should go, it's critical to understand that the very fact that there is a subspace is a choice that the character you're exploring with makes. Swan chooses to look more closely at this bookshelf. That makes this bookshelf important. It's not just a matter of, now you can click on some more stuff, hooray. The fact that Swan can interact with this bookshelf is a choice on Swan's part. It tells us about who Swan is at this time, in this place. And I thought that was a really cool set of, narrative concepts. It's much more interesting than a lot of people would normally give it credit for. You can design your walking sim to have a lot of really great texture. You just have to understand where you're coming from. There's a mechanical side to laying it out, but there's also a narrative side. And the more texture you give that narrative side, the more context, the better it feels to explore that space. See you around.